I was not considering part-time work. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I would totally suggest it to anybody who's thinking of leaving the classroom. It is a great way to get your foot in the door.
I'm Lisa Harding, ex-EdTech CEO turned certified teacher career coach. It wasn't all that long ago that I was recruiting, interviewing, and hiring teachers for roles in corporate America. Teachers that ended up being some of my all-time best employees. Fast forward through my own career transition, where I left my role as CEO to become a stay-at-home mom, I now work with and empower teachers to transform their lives by turning their once distant career dreams into realities. In this podcast, I give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're a burnt-out teacher or simply need a change and you're looking to create a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started.
And with that, I would love to welcome Stephanie Drake to the stage. Stephanie, as I said, is a former secondary English teacher who has since moved into the job of lesson writing and curriculum writing. So, Stephanie, first of all, so great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So, Stephanie, if you don't mind, can you just give us a bit of an introduction? So tell us about what you did in school, what you do now, and just as a whole, how has leaving the classroom really changed your life?
Sure. For 8 years, I was a high school secondary English teacher. I worked in the state of Colorado. I taught grades 8th all the way up through 12th grade. I'm now working at Curriculum Associates as a lesson writer. This transition into lesson writing has been truly transformative for my life in a really healthy way. I've been able to balance my work and life in a more sustainable way. I've been able to attend to my passions more and find more joy in it the everyday.
Now, I don't know about you if you were sitting on the other side of this, but like as a former teacher myself, like doesn't that just sound like the dream? Like to do something that you still enjoy, but have the time for yourself and your passions and all of the other things in your life that you absolutely need to do. So, Stephanie, I'm so happy that you have found something that has enabled you to do that. And I know you're going to give a lot of good tips on how you were able to make that transition happen and how you could really prioritize yourself in this next role. So really excited to dive into that. So, Stephanie, if I could have you start somewhere, I'd love for you just to start about how did you decide it was time to leave the classroom?
Sure. I kind of had this idea that I wanted to step out of the classroom as I was pursuing my graduate degree. I have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction, and I've just always loved creating resources. I love the creativity with creating curriculum, but also the analysis of thinking big picture and with the little details. I loved creating those learning moments for my students, but I didn't always want to be in front of the classroom. I knew that right from the start. But the desire to leave the classroom started to creep up more clearly when I was coming home from work completely exhausted. I didn't have any time to exercise or really take care of myself. I was working in the evenings. As a high school English teacher, I'm sure almost all teachers can relate, but I was grading every night, every Sunday for like multiple hours at a time. And I just didn't have a balance. I was compromising too much of myself. And so when I recognized that compromise and how I was letting go of my own health at the benefit of school, I realized I needed to make a change. And I kind of used my graduation with my graduate degree as the impetus to start really digging into that transition and what it might look like outside of the classroom. Ultimately, it took me several years to fully transition, but I was thinking about it in the back of my mind for a while. I never really dreaded going to school every day. I loved my students and I absolutely loved my coworkers. And I'm sure many of you can relate. Having an incredible co-working staff makes every day that much more rewarding. But it was just the compromise on my everyday that really brought me to this transition.
Yeah. And again, as someone who has also transitioned as well, I would also like to name that making that decision to leave is one of the hardest things you have to do in this transition, because it is tough to mentally decide to make a change, whether that be from fear of what's next or even having that guilt of like, I'm not going to be working with these kids anymore. I know I definitely felt that leaving. So just know that if you're in that mindset, it is hard to get over that hump, but know that once you do and you've committed, celebrate that feeling, because once you've decided that that next step needs to happen, that's where your future can really unlock. So I know how hard it is to get yourself into that headspace of being okay with making the choice, but know that once you do, you're going to feel a lot better about it. And I know, Stephanie, you talked a lot about that, of like, you recognize that your mental health, your physical health, like you really couldn't support yourself. And as, again, a former teacher, how can we fill everyone else's buckets if ours aren't full ourselves? So how were you able to work through that process of deciding, okay, yes, I need to put myself first? What helped you actually do that at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, when I was in my graduate coursework, I was taking a bunch of classes on mindfulness. I took a few classes at the University of Colorado in Boulder on mindfulness specifically for educators, and I was learning these strategies to attend to my own mental health in order to serve my students and also to help them with their emotional burdens. And in that process of building in mindful practices every day, or being able to like calm my mind in stressful moments, I recognized how much of a need I really had to attend to my health. I would, if you're in the classroom, I really recommend pursuing mindfulness for educators, because we have moments every day as teachers where things feel like too much, or we see an interaction coming on and we're not sure how to handle it. And this mindfulness practice allowed me to step back, assess a situation, care for myself, and then help my students. And I led mindfulness meditation practices for my students frequently, inside the classroom, in the halls, beyond. So that was a strategy. If I were still teaching, I would employ every day.
Totally. And I can definitely speak to the fact that that mindfulness will absolutely help you in this transition. There's a reason that we say that the first step is shifting your mindset, because that you have to make sure that your mind is in the right place, or else what comes next may not be exactly what you want. So the first step is putting that work into yourself and realizing that maybe there is some work we have to do to make sure that I'm in the right mental space to be ready for that next step. So I love that. And I think not only is that great advice for people still in the classroom, but like life in general, like there's always going to be times where things are going to be hard. And when you have that mindfulness as a routine in your day to day, it's just going to make things so much easier, especially in your career transition, which I know you and I are really going to talk about some like data behind that and like how that can feel like a lot. So I love that suggestion, is you have to focus on your own brain and how you are processing things, because this is hard. Like, we're not going to lie, transitioning careers is a tough thing to do, and it is mentally draining. But when you have those skills already to support yourself, it's going to make that transition and process exponentially easier for you. So I absolutely love that advice that you gave people. I would love to know too, you mentioned to me, you did a lot of networking. Can you talk about how networking played a part into you finding the role that you're in now?
Yeah. As a teacher, I found all of my teaching positions through the school district website, or through a connection, or maybe I already had my eye on the school. But LinkedIn and other professional networks were not necessarily the norm for my teaching experience. And so as I anticipated this transition, I really leaned into developing my LinkedIn page and networking, because it was totally foreign to me. I had to search wide and far to make connections on LinkedIn, because teachers were just not we're not using those resources as often as other professions. And so throughout that process, I realized, okay, networking is key, and it feels a little awkward and cringy at times to consistently put yourself out there, but that's what the platform is for, and everybody else is doing it too. And so once I realized that, I found myself just sharing with everybody that I was looking for a job in X field. I wanted to go into curriculum design, or learning and design. And I would share my experience. I started talking to people everywhere. I met somebody at a yard sale who connected me with two other educators, and we had a coffee chat. I met somebody on a plane. I'm not kidding. I really extended myself. I told all my friends and family. And ultimately, throughout that process, people started to send me job listings or offer suggestions. And because I had networked and built my LinkedIn page and kind of leaned into this part of the process, the support, or the community around me, knew what I was looking for, and that's how I found my current job. A friend of mine knew that I was interested in writing curriculum and suggested I speak with this woman who worked at the company I now work at. She no longer works there, but I spoke with her. I talked about I shared my resume with her. She talked about interviewing tactics and things I might consider for the future if I were to get an interview with this company. And days after I spoke with her, they posted a position and she referred me. So I can't say that there's a one-size-fits-all approach to transitioning from teaching. There's absolutely not. At the same time I was transitioning, two of my close teacher friends were also moving out of the classroom, and they had very different experiences. So I'm happy to share what I did, and I'll talk you through all of that. But I do want to offer this kind of caveat that you have to find the way that works for you to balance your life, your teaching, the job applications. Like there's not a one size fits all.
Totally. But I think you make such a good point though with networking, is that is such an easy way to help expand that network and give you more possibilities. So like, yes, there's absolutely no one size fits all of this. It's going to be very dependent on what you need from a job, what you want from a job, where you currently are in your transition. But if there's one thing that I feel like I have, even as much as I knew this, I think hosting these webinars has really helped me realize the amount of networking that people do in such various different ways. And more often than not, I'm hearing that the people are getting their jobs through a connection that they made through networking. Because if we're being real, we are in a job market right now where it is way easier to get a job if you know someone there. And Stephanie is a perfect example of that. She was able to get referred by someone, and having someone at the company. As someone who's at a company now, I think about that all the time. We get hundreds of applications, but a lot of the ones that at least get into the interview process are ones that have a direct referral, because it's just one more piece of information. They can be like, oh, I would keep them over someone else that we don't know anything about. So networking is totally, totally huge. And so if you're not on LinkedIn, everyone, got to go get yourself on LinkedIn. I will tell you, like, yes, Stephanie's right. We did not have to use that as teachers. Like, definitely did not need that at all. You need it now. Like, if you are choosing to leave being in a school, you need to get on LinkedIn and just do what Stephanie did. Just start reaching out to people. I've had people ask me before, like, is it weird? No, it's not. Like, this is not like Facebook. LinkedIn is literally meant to do just this, connect you with other professionals for whatever that reason may be. So do not be scared of LinkedIn. Got to dive headfirst into it. So just caveat plug, if you're not on there, get on there. I will happily drop my LinkedIn in after this as well. Stephanie, you're welcome to do the same. So if you want to connect with us, just expand your network, get more connections on there. And I tell you, you never know where you're going to find a job lurking around the corner. So absolutely expand that network.
And Megan, I think I might just add one point here that I saw the networking as a point moving forward. This transition is long and arduous and intimidating, and it feels like you're not moving at all, right? You're moving at a glacial speed sometimes. And so if I made a new LinkedIn connection, or I spoke with somebody and they looked at my resume and gave me one nugget of information to implement, I felt like that was a point moving forward. And I took that, take your wins when you can. So I would just offer that perspective to every transitioning teacher. It's long and hard, but there are moments to celebrate throughout the process.
And you should celebrate those, the things you should celebrate, because you need that as like your mental boost. Because like you said, it is hard, but when you have something to celebrate it. You should. It should feel good, whether that be getting a resume out, whether that be getting an interview, whatever that celebration is for you. Celebrate that, because that goes back to your mindfulness. It's going to help you have that positive mindset while you're going through this. And, actually, from one Stephanie to another, I have a Stephanie in the chat who asked a really great question that I know it really resonates with your story. So Stephanie made a comment, which I totally, totally feel. It's really hard to carve out time to work on your LinkedIn or do anything else related to your career transition when you are working full time. And Stephanie, I know that you said that you did start applying to jobs before you left the classroom. So can you talk a little bit about what that process looked for you while you were still teaching and looking for a new job at the same time?
Today's episode is sponsored by the Teacher Career Transition Academy. Our academy provides expert career coaching, professional resume and cover letter templates, small group coaching sessions, and a supportive peer network. The best way to jumpstart your career change journey is to enroll in my free Beyond the Classroom Masterclass. Visit teachercareertransitionacademy.com/masterclass to enroll now. I'll also drop the link to register for free in the show notes of this episode. This free masterclass is sure to kickstart your journey or give you the boost you need to move the needle if you're already in the career change process. Enroll for free at teachercareertransitionacademy.com/masterclass.
So I knew I wanted to transition out of the classroom in around February. I let my administrator know at that point, and I started to rework my resume as my first step and research positions or careers that might be a good step moving forward. I had to apply, and this might not be very linear here, but let me talk you through it. I had to apply to over 190 jobs. I had an interview about every 30 jobs. I went to the final round with several interviews, and it just never really fit for me or for the company. And so I want to make those statistics clear. Like, it was long and arduous. The company that I currently work for, I had previously applied multiple times to work for them, and I was rejected. So I just want to be clear that, like, it's long and hard. I had friends that were set goals to apply to 10 jobs a week, and that felt like a lot for me. So I made baby steps. My first step was, I need to clarify what exactly I want to move into. I knew that I was really good at writing curriculum and having this like big picture and tiny detail perspective. And I knew that could lend itself to instructional design, but instructional design is a really large category, and I wanted to narrow beyond that. So then I went into curriculum writing, curriculum design, and learning and design, which those all sound like really similar titles, and they do overlap. But being able to discern where my strengths are in job applications was really helpful. After that, I started, Megan, were you going to ask?
Nope, you keep going, and then I'll circle back with my question.
Okay. Well, after I clarified what type of career I wanted to move into, I started to take some classes on LinkedIn, just to, again, move forward. And that would be, I think I purchased the LinkedIn subscription, and I got X amount of hours of classes to take. But I would sort of see it as my homework, and I wanted to get one class done every 2 weeks. And I would put aside time on Sunday night or Wednesday night, whatever time worked for me in my schedule, to get my homework done. And then after I finished that class, I would set the next goal. Toward the summer, when my teaching load lessened and my free time increased, I increased the quantity of job applications I was putting out, and how I was networking. But that is going to look different for each person. Like I said, a friend of mine was applying to 10 jobs a week, and that was too much for me while I was teaching. So you have to figure out that perfect balance without compromising too much of yourself, right? There might be, at the start of the transition, there might be a period where you're working overtime, and then it'll balance itself out some more.
Totally. And I think one thing that can feel hard is figuring out that balance of, like, what is the right balance for me, of what do I have the feasible amount of time to work on each week. But I think what's really important is that you have to hold yourself accountable to it. And going back and thinking about how you were doing mindfulness, all of those activities are going to really help and support people while they are in that hard phase of, like, again, I was there too. The last thing I wanted to do when I got home from work was go find a new job. Like, I totally get it, but that's it. It is what it is, where you have to do it. So I love, like you said, maybe someone else is doing more than you. That's okay. Do not let that affect your mindset. You do whatever you are able to do in the time that you have. And again, things will work out the way they're supposed to. So don't stress if someone else's process is moving faster or moving slower, just moving in a different direction. You will find the groove and the cadence that works for you. But let's name it, like, it is hard to be motivated to go home and to put this extra work in. So start small and just figure out what little things you can do, whether it be every day, every few days, every week. And then, as Stephanie said, that's going to build over time. And I know we're closing in on summer break, and I know not everyone gets their whole summers off. Maybe they're working other jobs, they have kids at home, whatever it may be. But just think about how you are able to work that into your schedule. And then you'll see how quickly a lot of that will start to pay off. So Stephanie, the question that I was wondering was, you were talking about there's like a few different fields, if that's the right word for it, within the larger field that you're in. So can you talk about some of the different roles and how they differ, since, like you said, there's lesson writing, there's curriculum, like, can you just talk a little bit about how those are different?
Yeah. Well, I am working as a lesson writer for an educational publisher. Previously, prior to this position, I would have called this work curriculum design. But now that I'm in it, I know that it's actually more nuanced than that. As a lesson writer, I am writing the really small moments that students interact with on a learning platform. I have editors above me that help me craft the work, but the lesson writing itself is the entry-level position. Beyond that, at the editor role, beyond the editors, there's folks that are thinking more globally about the product, and that is what I would call curriculum design, where they're thinking about what do students need to learn, what passages are most appropriate, what text is most appropriate, what sort of essential questions do we need to ask. And at least in my company, those positions are not entry level. I do work for an educational company. I work for an educational publisher, but I was also looking at positions in curriculum writing for corporate companies, and a lot of what I'm doing now would have been classified as instructional design, creating learning resources for a corporate world or a corporate company, right? I have a friend that is working for Hunter Douglas, the window company, and she is making all of their training materials, their learning materials for their staff, but she equates it to writing a lesson for her 8th grade students.
And I think that I'm so glad that you dove into that more, because I think you bring up a good point too, that this field doesn't exist just in the educational world of some type of either a publisher or something like that. These roles do exist in other industries and other fields. So it's great food for thought for all of you too, of do I want to be actually writing lessons in the sense of students learning it, whatever it may be, or am I just looking to do some type of learning, whether it be for adults, for kids? I just want to be able to take my knowledge and skills of how to teach and apply that to a different type of material. So I love that you brought that up, because there are so many different avenues that you can take. So with the avenue that you chose, can you talk a little bit about what your weekly responsibilities look like?
Sure. And before I do the weekly responsibilities, I do want to offer just some perspective, not to necessarily limit yourself just to an educational company. They're competitive, and oftentimes they hire contractors that they've already worked with, right? I told you that I had to apply to the company I work for, Curriculum Associates, multiple times before I got this position, because they were just filling with folks they already knew. And I just want to offer, it is probably valuable to broaden beyond ed tech or educational publishing because of how competitive it can be. Totally. In terms of my weekly responsibilities, I work part-time, as I already explained. So I set my own schedule. I have maybe a check-in with my team depending on where we are in our projects. But if I do have that check-in, it's scheduled well ahead of time. And so I can work my life and routines around that. I will say I'm a teacher still. So I'm waking up at, as soon as the sun rises and it's time to go to school in my mind. So I'm still kind of restricting myself to the school schedule, but that is my own doing and not by my employer whatsoever. Today in the middle of the day, I took my dog to the vet, and I also went and did a few errands in the middle of the day and came back and kept working. So my schedule is completely flexible and totally up to me, which has been really useful and valuable for me in reestablishing a healthy work-life balance. My family and I just relocated from Colorado to New Hampshire, and I was able to drive across the country and still work and maintain my regular hours with that flexibility. I was working, from a hotel at odd hours in the evening after driving, but still I wouldn't have been able to do that while I was teaching. And that's not to say that every transitioning teacher is moving across the country, but just as an anecdote, I am able to do other life things amidst my day, and it's totally normal and accepted and celebrated as well. Throughout the day, my work consists of creating lessons on Microsoft Word, sharing my documents, getting feedback, revising my work. The work is isolated to a document, but it's collaborative in the sense that I'm constantly talking with my coworkers, those that are my direct peers, and my supervisors, and finding ways to better and refine my work.
Awesome. And, Erica just asked a great question, which actually leads into the last bullet point that's on my screen about room for growth. So Erica said, since you're part-time, are you doing something else, or are you aiming to be full-time at your company? So can you actually walk through I know you have like a whole thought process on this. So I would love for you to share that, because it's a great question, and the insights that you have on this are great.
Thanks for bringing this up. There's so much to share, and I had forgotten about this point, but it is really valuable. When I was applying to move out of the classroom, I was not considering part-time positions at all, because I was thinking about paying the bills and how would I be able to do that with a part-time work. As it turns out, my part-time position pays nearly as much as my full-time teaching salary. And I can't say that that's true for every part-time company, but I just want to offer that perspective, because I would not have considered a part-time position without I was not considering part-time work. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I would totally suggest it to anybody who's thinking of leaving the classroom. It is a great way to get your foot in the door. Recently, I had a coffee chat with a coworker who's been at the company for 15 years. And I asked her, how do you keep finding work as a contractor? And she said that once you're in, people seek you out. And of course, you still have to apply to jobs, but it's that very first get your foot in the door that's the steepest entry curve. And then it gets a lot easier. So if you have a part-time position open to you, I think it's well worth it. When I did take this part-time position, I was a little cautious and worried that I wouldn't be able to pay the bills. And so I brainstormed with my husband, how are we going to make this work? And I realized that we talked through our bills and our responsibilities, but I also realized that I had the capacity and the interest to take on other work. And so I pursued other part-time positions. I worked at a craft store. I was teaching like woodworking lessons and painting lessons to other folks. So I had that little bit of education still in my life. And it was a really great decision. I would have never considered doing that while teaching, because I just did not have the capacity. But now I do. I feel like I can volunteer more often or connect with folks, not just on Saturdays, So I do want to offer that I did work another part-time job when I initially started, and it's because I wanted to and I was able to. Now I'm more tenured in my company. I've been there for about 8 months now. I'm no longer working at that craft store, since I told you we moved across the country. But I'm finding that I'm getting more and more work at my company, and I am looking for a full-time position at this company. But I could take on more work if I wanted to, because I have that healthy balance. I hope I'm not being too repetitive.
No, I think what you're saying is all the real things that are so true about the transition. So absolutely do not feel bad if you're repeating, because it's so true where it is.
Well, friends, that concludes part 1 of this teacher career transition story. But there's a lot more valuable information coming your way in part 2 that you don't want to miss. So check out our channel for part 2. And remember, friends, the journey is just the beginning. Embrace the adventure.